Hello, everybody. This is John Rhodes, and welcome to Healthcare Legal and Ethical Considerations. Just first of all, I apologize for being dressed down today. Today is Labor Day. I am at home. Normally, I do these videos when I get into the office on Monday mornings, and I try to post them each Monday morning. Since I'm not in the office today and I need to get this posted today, I felt little desire to get dressed up in order to do a 15-minute video. So apologize in advance for that. Hopefully you understand. Today is the first day of the first module, so welcome, and hopefully you find a lot of value in the class and the material in these videos. So what I normally do in these videos, a few weeks ago, I found some of the old, I've taught this class 3 or 4 times, and I found some of my old videos that I posted that are out on YouTube and showed them to my wife, and she made a comment about how boring they are. So I totally recognize that sometimes the material can get a little boring. But hopefully you get some value out of these. And sometimes I recognize as the words are coming out of my mouth how boring sometimes the material can be. So I'll do the best I can to sort of liven things up. If not in these videos, then in the class discussions, as we try to probe and dig deeper into the analysis of the various discussion questions that we'll be covering over the next 8 weeks. So in these videos, I try to recap the material from the prior week, cover some of the answers and responses and the dialogue from the discussion questions, and introduce the material for the upcoming week. And I'll also write it out in a post that'll have the link to this video. So I've gotten some feedback that these videos tend to be helpful. And in this week's video, I'm gonna discuss a little bit, just introduction to some of the material that we'll be going over the next few weeks, and then at the end I'll give you some tips that I've learned over the last 3 or 4 classes that I've taught on how to be successful in this class. And so I think I think you should be able to get some value out of that. So feel free to, hopefully by now or here in the near future, you'll see the introductory post that I put up a while back that tells a little bit about myself and my background. I've been in working in healthcare for a while now, over 10 years, as a healthcare attorney, and I've represented and handled all sorts of medical issues, healthcare issues, in the legal sense. But of course, as we'll go over the next few weeks, when you talk about the first part of this class, we're talking about healthcare legal issues, how to look and analyze those, and then we'll get into the ethics issues, and you'll find that many times the legal part of healthcare and the ethical part of healthcare overlap, and so there's some overlap, but there's also some parts that you need to look at it differently. So anyways, it's a field that I enjoy very much. I know many of you, if not all of you, are in the healthcare industry in the clinical aspect, and so I think the more you engage and discuss not privileged or not confidential information, but just some of your own experiences, and apply them to the concepts that we'll discuss, I think the more value everyone will get out of the discussion questions and the assignments that we'll go over the next 8 weeks. But just as an introduction, the concept of ethics, as many of you that work in the field, permeates the entire healthcare field. Everything from is healthcare a right or a privilege? And the closer we get to this election cycle, the more you'll hear about that. I mean, clearly, if you pay attention to the Democratic presidential debates, the very hot issue is how to deal with the current healthcare system and how to either improve upon it or make wholesale changes to it. Is a pretty big topic. So that's for some, for many, it's an ethical issue. Is it a right or a privilege? Later in the class, we'll be talking about end of life issues. You know, how to deal with those. There are a handful of states that have passed what's called death with dignity laws. Colorado is one of them, which is where I live. Oregon and others will be talking about a specific situation towards the end of class out of Oregon. And so there's another ethical issue. Insurance coverage, denying coverage based on, pre-existing conditions is a legal issue at this point, but it's also an ethical issue. Even narrow networks where, insurance plans try to narrow the specialists that you're able to see in order to cut down on the costs of that particular healthcare plan. I apologize if you hear my dog barking. I think she's yapping downstairs. I worked in the dialysis industry as in-house counsel for about 4 or 5 years, and dealt specifically with a lot of different healthcare or health insurance companies that did a lot of things to carve out high-cost patients from its risk pool. In order to avoid those high costs. I mean, cancer patients and end-stage renal disease patients are among the highest cost patients in a healthcare plan's risk pool, and so that there are legal and there are ethical issues associated with that. And so many times when you're talking about ethical issues, not just in healthcare, but for our purposes in the healthcare field. It quickly gets into it can quickly get into a political debate. Everyone's has an opinion one way or the other, which is fine, and I think that's great. I think everyone should have an opinion, should be able to voice that opinion. I think what's really important for our purposes is we engage in the discussion questions and engage in dialogue and express those opinions as we respond to other people's opinions, is to keep it respectful. I think everyone is entitled to their opinion, and no one expects all opinions to be the same. I think there's a lot of value in having differing opinions and having a diversity of ideas and thoughts. And so it's okay to respond and respectfully disagree and give your basis for that disagreement without attacking or being disrespectful in any way. So let's keep that in mind as we're engaging in this discussion, these discussions over the next several weeks. So we're talking about a little bit about patient confidentiality and HIPAA. There's a discussion question that's probably my favorite discussion question from the class here in a few weeks. But if you go to chapter 10 of your text, there's a scenario that's good to look at and think about. It says a physician from another office steps into your office and asks to see the chart of a neighbor whom he believes may have an infectious disease. He states that the neighbor is a good friend and that she will not mind if he reviews her medical chart. Is it legal for you to give the chart to this physician? So there's some questions to think about. Is this permissible? Should it be? This is probably 8 or 9 years ago. I was in private practice in Kansas as a healthcare attorney, and we got a call from a client that was a hospital where I think it was a quarterback. I think it was a quarterback, one of the star players from one of the universities in Missouri, was injured in a game and went to the hospital to get x-rays. And I think the x-rays came back negative. It was a while ago. I don't remember exactly all the details, but I think the x-rays came back negative. And one of the nurses had put something out on Facebook saying that this quarterback was fine to play this next week. Well, you know, there are some problems with that, and so the hospital called us, and we kind of guided them through a corrective action plan and how to handle that going forward. But these are some things to think about from both from an ethical, confidentiality, and legal perspective. You know, something else we'll talk about is you know, what if someone who presents to the emergency room and needs urgent care? You know, what if the person doesn't have insurance, or that particular emergency department is out of network with the patient's plan? You know, is it legal or ethical to turn the patient away or send the patient to another emergency department in another city? You know, there are ethical issues surrounding that, clearly, but it's also a legal issue, and this is just a good example of how legal issues in healthcare and ethical issues in healthcare overlap. I mean, I think a lot of people, most people would have an issue with, from an ethical standpoint, of someone who has a serious medical condition shows up to an emergency department, and the emergency department says, oh, you don't have insurance, and sends you away, and that person ends up dying or whatever it may be. So, you know, I think most people would have a serious ethical issue with that. Well, a while back, Congress passed a law that many of you are probably familiar with, EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, that prohibits that makes that illegal. So if someone shows up to an emergency department with a medical emergency, they're entitled to a medical screening, and the emergency department staff has to give them stabilizing care, all before they can ask about any insurance or payment questions. And so an ethical issue transformed into a legal issue, because, you know, us collectively as a society agree that emergency departments shouldn't be able to turn those patients away. Okay, so, you know, we're going to get into mostly, you know, we're going to be studying a case, the Ituraldi case. It's a malpractice case. We'll get into the legal issues. We'll get into the ethical issues of what occurred. Please pay close attention to that case, read it carefully, and spot the issues that pertain to the questions that are being asked on the various assignments. But we'll also get into, I want to talk a little bit about the business of healthcare. So I think it's week 3 or 4, I don't recall. We'll be talking a little bit about federal fraud and abuse laws, how healthcare transactions work, the corporate structure of healthcare organizations and health systems. We'll be talking a little bit about that. You know, the False Claims Act with respect to Medicare and Medicaid, how Medicare and Medicaid work, some of the laws surrounding that, and also a little bit about physician disciplinary cases. Yeah, I've defended a couple of different, a neurologist and a gastroenterologist in physician disciplinary cases, and while those are probably the best stories in terms of you know, the fact that they're interesting and what some of these physicians get themselves into, there are also some ethical and legal issues surrounding that as well. Scope of practice, we'll talk about. That's a big deal. So, you know, review and answer discussion questions, stay on track with final projects, and please always feel free to reach out if you have any questions or would like to discuss. I really try to make myself as available as possible. Sometimes, you know, many times when students have fallen behind or just it's just not clicking for them, you know, I've offered many times to make myself available, and those that really kind of fall into a hole in terms of grades and assignments are those that don't reach out and don't work with me in order to either better grasp the material or work on the assignments together, whatever it may be. So I really encourage you, if that happens to you, to please reach out and we'll work together. I'm very flexible, and I just want you to be able to get value out of the class, and so we'll work together on that. So that's it in terms of introducing the class. I do want to touch on a few things that I've learned over the course of teaching this class. This might be, I think this is my 4th time teaching this class. Some tips on how to be successful in this class. The first thing is I grade, and I think many of your instructors do, solely, strictly on the requirements of the rubric. And so in your assignments, if you notice that there are, 5 different, for example, 5 different rubric requirements, my advice is just to make it easier for me to read and to give you the best chance possible to get a good grade on the assignment, is to just separate on your assignment, separate your responses into those 5 different sections. So so if you have, section 1, give me a section header, and that section header should match the first section, the first rubric requirement, and then give me exactly what the rubric is asking for. Section 2 should match on your assignment. Section 2, give me a section header that matches what the second rubric requirement is, and so on. So just separate your assignment by sections based on the rubric, to make it as easy as possible to grade and to read, and then I think you'll be in a good spot. So please follow the rubric. That's what I do when I grade, and I grade and give my feedback based on that, and so it's in your best interest to do that as well. This class is all about teaching how to do a legal analysis, or to think critically about healthcare issues. So I'm less interested in what your final conclusion is, as long as it's reasonable. So, but I'm more interested in how you got to that conclusion. And so you'll see in your reading materials a legal analysis method called IRAC, I-R-A-C. I think it's critical. It's really important for you to follow that method or form of legal analysis. So when you're doing your legal analysis, you'll notice that, like for negligence, we're going to talk a lot about negligence, medical malpractice in this case. Well, that is a term of art that has 4 elements. So a negligence case has 4 different elements to that. And so in order to, if you're trying to say, okay, so-and-so performed negligently or didn't, then you got to show me why. And the only way to do that, or how, the only way to do that is to analyze each element. And if even one element of a negligence case is missing, then there is no negligence. So for example, one of the elements of a negligence case is a breach of duty. You got to show that there was a duty of care. That duty is demonstrated by the formation of the physician-patient relationship, okay, which is really easy to show, but you got to go through that exercise of showing me that. So you show me that, okay, so you establish that there was a duty of care. The second element is the physician breached that duty of care. And so how do you show the breach of duty? Well, did the physician meet the standards, the standard of care, the normal standard of care, and you'll see in the material, and we'll discuss a little bit later on, how do you analyze standard of care? What is the standard of care? So analyze that, show me how the physician did or didn't, based on the facts that are given to you, meet the standard of care. Once you establish that, you move on to the next element, and so on. And then your conclusions at the end. So IRAC method, issue, give me the issue. The R is for rule, give me the rule. What is the rule? Apply the facts to the rule. You got to take specific facts from the case that's given to you and apply those to the rule. And then the C is for conclusion. Then give me your conclusion based on that analysis. I don't care what the conclusion is, because if you go through the analysis, it's going to be reasonable. The thing to understand is that in law, even in ethics, but here particularly in law, if the answer was clear cut, there would be no litigation, there would be no disputes, because the answers would be no-brainers. But that is almost never the case. Normally, each side has a reasonable position, and that's why you take it to the judge, present your case, and there's a determination that's made. So the key is in the analysis. Give me the issue, give me the rule, apply the facts, specific facts, not general facts, specific facts from the case, apply that to the rule, and then give me your conclusion. As long as it's reasonable, then that's fine. But the key is in the analysis. I can't stress that enough, because it's a lot of times that goes missing in these assignments. But the key is in the analysis, and I'm happy to go into that further with anyone who has questions about that once you get into it. But we'll be stressing that and emphasizing that over the next 8 weeks. The key is in the analysis. Use the IRAC method, analyze every element separately, and then give me the conclusion in the end based on your analysis. Another thing that gets students tripped up are turning in assignments timely. If an emergency comes up, I think everyone's familiar with the late assignment policy, but I'm happy to work with you. But please make that a priority. I understand that life happens for me as well. And so I would just make that a priority in terms of getting those assignments in timely. Just looking over here at my notes, what else am I missing? I think that's it. The main issue is I wanted to emphasize the analysis part. One thing in my notes here that I mentioned is, there's a discussion question in a few weeks, and we'll go over this a little bit more, but it's a HIPAA related question, and you're presented a bunch of facts, and then you're asked, is this a breach? A lot of times students get tripped up on this by just kind of going with their gut. Well, yeah, it's looks to be a breach, and this is why, blah, 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 blah. That is the wrong way to approach it. The right way to approach it is go through this IRAC method of analysis. You know what the issue is. You've been presented the facts. Give me the issue. Give me the rule. Well, in this case, the rule is what is a breach? The breach is a defined term, and I'll send out a link to the definition of breach. But the term breach in the HIPAA context requires an analysis. Actually there are different factors that need to be reviewed and analyzed to really determine if it was a breach. And so you got to take me through that analysis to really come to the reasonable conclusion whether it was a breach or not, and then give me the conclusion. So just again, the value, if you get nothing else out of this class, I hope you get what I hope you get out of the class is some understanding of the importance of analysis, how to perform an analysis, and think critically about healthcare related issues that are presented in this class, but also that you face in your jobs day to day. So that's all I have. Good luck with week 1. Remember, I'm here if you have any questions or need anything, and good luck to y'all. I look forward to working with all of you. Thanks.